Hello everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over Unit 1, Lesson 5. My name is Janapriya, and let's talk about qualitative research methods. The first qualitative research method is observation. So observation is just what the name suggests. It's observing people or animals in a natural setting. So observation is basically used to collect data regarding like social interactions and behavior in that sense. And it is also used when data cannot be put into words or data can't be transferred through a verbal system like interviews, like you have to look at the behavior in order to analyze it. And also it is very strong in terms of firsthand experiences because the researcher is actually going to be present there looking at the exact subject that they're studying. So in this type of study, the researcher is very immersed in this process of data collection because the researcher is subject to their own selective attention and their own interpretations, which is why reflexivity is also very important. Because, for example, if the same group of people were observing a group of monkeys, one researcher would not have the same subjective interpretations as another researcher, as they have their own beliefs and types of interpretation and things that they want to pay attention to. So we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at observations. So a major advantage of observations is that you can find diverse data about natural behavior because interpretations are limitless. However, a limitation would be the subjectivity and the biases that are involved in this, because not everyone can view the same thing as the same. For example, someone looking at a red heart may think that the heart color is maroon, or that the heart shape is curved or rather than geometric. However, someone else might think different because they have their own interpretations. And a way to combat this subjectivity is reflexivity, which is what we discussed earlier in earlier videos, which is to reflect on your own biases and prior beliefs so that people can keep that into mind when they read your interpretations. And this can therefore increase credibility, like discussed before. So moving on, we're going to look at 3 types of observation. First one is naturalistic observation. This is natural, like the name suggests. It's carried out in naturally occurring settings where the researcher has minimal influence. And here I'm just going to use pluses and minuses to signify strengths and limitations for the sake of simplicity. So a major advantage of this, of naturalistic observations, would be that researchers can observe otherwise unethical situations, such as observing intergroup conflict. Like you wouldn't want to actually provoke such conflict just to observe it. So you can just use naturalistic observation and observe it as the situation is occurring. So you can just take advantage of that opportunity in order to study something while being ethical. A major limitation of naturalistic observation would be that it would be time consuming to find the correct situation that you want to study. Intergroup conflicts, for example, like a war or something, won't be happening all the time. So you're going to have to wait patiently to find out when you can observe that or just somehow find an opportunity. So it might be very time consuming to obtain that. The next one is a simple difference between overt and covert observations. So the difference is if the participants know they're being watched. So an overt observation, you can think of it as obvious. It's obvious that the participants are aware that they're being observed. Overt means participants know that they're being observed. An advantage of this is that there's good ethics. You can obtain consent before observing them, so there's no problems. However, a limitation would be biases. If someone's watching you, you're going to act differently. For example, if you're taking a test and then your teacher walks past you and looks over your shoulder, you're going to write faster. You're going to act differently. So that's basically the Hawthorne effect, which can also occur in this situation. The next one is covert. Covert, you can think of like undercover, And in this thing, the researcher does not inform the participants and they're like undercover, spying on them, kind of stalking them, And here, a positive is that there's less participant bias because the people are just acting as if it's a normal day. No one's watching them. But the negative is that there's bad ethics. You're not obtaining the consent before you're observing them. And that's potentially a violation of privacy because I don't think you'd want to be spied on by psychologists. The last one here is participant observation. This is when an observer becomes a part of the observed group. So if I'm studying a group of students, I'm going to go in disguised as a student in order to learn about them in a more in-depth manner. The positive here is that you can obtain firsthand evidence. So you're there, you see it, you're going to observe it with your own eyes, not some article or subjective interpretation. You're going to observe it and you're going to put it into your brain. But a limitation would be that there may be ethical concerns because the students might think you're actually a normal student when in fact you're just a researcher in disguise, just observing them. And then there's also a loss of objectivity, because maybe I go into the group of students and I start talking with them and I become really good friends, and then I lose my objectivity. So I think of things in a more subjective manner with my emotions and feelings and beliefs involved rather than just psychological data. So let's move on to interviews. Interviews are a very popular qualitative method due to their quick data collection and verbal reports. So any unobservable subjective phenomenon can be studied through interviews and verbal reports. So things like how people think or how people view the subject. You can't really observe that, so you can obtain data through transcripts in verbal reports from your participants. And also, this is also popular because you can find a deeper meaning of the participants' experiences by asking them questions. And this is a very personal form of research between the participant and the researcher. And that's why it's very important to establish a rapport. I think I said that right, a rapport, which is basically like a connection or a form of trust and bonding between the researcher and the participant, so that you guys have a mutual understanding, so you guys can make your study go smoothly. And here, data is collected in the form of textual evidence or interview transcripts. And this may also include interview notes, which are just additional observations that include context or thick descriptions that increase the credibility of our data, because we are not just stating things, we're also giving some extra evidence. So we have three types of interviews. We have structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. There's basically the difference is in structure, as we can see. So in structured interviews, we're just going to have fixed questions. We're going to ask this question, this question, this question, nothing else, no deviation. This is very effective for like telephone calls, which can be done en masse so that everyone can answer the same questions and data can be collected really fast. There's no straying from the questions. And semi-structured interviews are basically in a checklist type of form where we want to touch on these points, point A, point B, and point C, but we can also go for some clarifications or extra side topics if we'd like, but it's not as structured as fixed questions. It gives a little bit more wiggle room. And unstructured interviews are basically fully participant driven. The researcher asks a question and the participant elaborates, and a major defining characteristic of this would be that there can be many different outcomes based on what the participants have to say and what elaborations and what types of points they want to cover. So unstructured interviews are just basically participant-based. So moving on to focus groups. This is a special type of semi-structured interview that is conducted in a 6 to 10 people range. This is like a collaborative, interactive discussion amongst people where people can build on other people's thoughts. And it's just a place where people can come together, have a conversation, discuss, and the researcher can take notes, something around that. And four of the major advantages of a focus group is that it's a quick way to obtain information. Like many people are talking at once, you get many different perspectives, you can just obtain the information. And also another advantage would be that it's a natural and comfortable environment. It's not a laboratory or artificial setting where you're like under stress because you're in an x-ray or you're taking a placebo, something like that. You're just with other people, you're talking. It's just less participant bias as people are not as stressed in an artificial environment. The third advantage is that it's easier to combat sensitivity bias in a group. If everyone's talking about the same topic, a sensitive topic like abortion or religion, something like that, about depression, if everyone's talking about it, it's going to be less sensitive to talk about because you're not cornered and you're not going to be personally attacked or anything like that. It's a group discussion and everyone's talking the same thing, so you don't feel personally separated. And the last advantage is that you can get multiple perspectives, which equal a holistic understanding of your subject. So it's not just one person talking, it's many different people. They're building on their different viewpoints, so you're going to get a really wholesome understanding of your topic. Three of disadvantages would be dominant response bias. In this bias, we're going to see one main participant come out as really assertive and try to like skew the whole group. Like there's 6 people, this one person is like, I believe this, and everyone else is like, yes, I agree. And they might not have agreed until the dominant person said that. So that might skew everyone's results. So it's important for the researcher as a moderator to make sure that everyone has an equal say and that dominant participants are told to, I guess, quiet down. And it is obviously more difficult to preserve privacy in terms of anonymity and confidentiality, as everyone knows everyone, and they can see what they say, and it's not very easy to make sure that people and their opinions are kept private, because other people also know that, because it's a group. I want to contrast these two terms, anonymity and confidentiality. So anonymity is basically no one knows who you are. Like, you don't put your name on it. If you take a survey, for example, you don't put your name on it. No one knows who wrote this, who filled this out. It's just anonymous. You are not connected to an identity. However, confidentiality is where your identity is known, but it is kept away from others. I hope that makes sense. And here it's really hard to make transcripts for focus groups. This is because there's many people talking at once, and it might be hard for the researcher to pinpoint who is saying what. So it's very hard to create those. So now on to content analysis. This is basically a specific type called inductive content analysis, or also called thematic analysis. This is basically to derive some recurring themes across data. For example, if we're going to talk about how online learning is affecting schools, we'd derive some themes from our transcripts or interpretations or interview, focus group transcripts, things like that. We're just going to derive some themes. Like, I found a social theme. I found a theme about test taking. I found a theme about this, that. We're going to obtain themes that are common among all of our transcripts. So the steps in this analysis would be first to write the transcript, and then we can write the transcript in either a verbatim or postmodern form, where verbatim is word for word. You just type down everything the person says, and then postmodern would be basically verbatim plus maybe some notes on behavioral elements, maybe some gestures, facial expressions, just extra content, thick description related items. The next step would be to read this raw material and then identify some broad themes, some initial themes, and then we're going to go deeper. We're going to find some low-level themes, and then we're going to group them into some high-level themes. We're going to organize our themes next in some table, and then finally we're going to make conclusions. We're going to infer some theme to theory links based on a table, so we can conclude the findings of our study. Next, we can also have memos, which are just side notes to help explain how and why analysis decisions were made. This is basically an explanation of why you did what, and this therefore increases credibility. And lastly, grounded theory is basically a theory that emerges from data. It just grows out. From the ground, it grows out of empirical data rather than beliefs. So it's based on evidence. Lastly, we have a case study. A case study is an in-depth investigation of a group or individual. So this can actually be in any other method, like it could be an interview, or it could be a small focus group. It could also be a content analysis of a few people, or an observation of a few people. So it can be any of the other previously described research methods. However, the defining characteristic is that it's just a few people or one person, and anything that deepens our understanding of a certain group of people or individual. So there's less focus on generalizability because we're just focusing on in-depth information. We're not trying to generalize like quantitative research. We're just focusing on that one person and trying to look at why they're so special. Sampling is not an issue because you're only interested in this person. You don't really care about anything else. So you just sample who you want to sample because we're not focusing on generalizability. An advantage of this would be an opportunity to study what you otherwise couldn't study. So there's this example. I think 13-year-old girl at the time of her research, she was kept locked away in her abusive parents' house ever since a little child. She was never allowed to learn language. She never really did any of the things a normal girl would do. So she basically grew up really deficient in language abilities and abilities a normal child would have. So psychologists took the opportunity to learn about her and learn about language acquisition in her because she is a special case. It would be very, very unethical to actually subject someone to such conditions. So psychologists took the chance and studied Jeannie for how language affected her and how she might be able to learn language again. And also, case studies can help develop new theories, because if you're looking at really novel data and novel instances, you can find new theories, find new data that may falsify other theories based on your new information, because this new information might contradict some pre-existing theories. And that's just the process of psychology and science. A limitation of a case study would be participant or researcher bias, because there's only you and them. So it's really a high chance that you can have some bias there. The person could hide some things from you, or you could only selectively look at certain things about them. It's just really prone to bias. Next is low generalizability. We already discussed this, because our sampling isn't really random. It's just whoever we want to study. So this is very novel data, which might not generalize to everyone. So that's why there's low generalizability. And lastly, it's really hard to ensure privacy, because Jeannie is the only one in the study. And if you're going to mention her, you might give her a pseudonym. But it's very hard to ensure privacy because there's not a large mass of people like distributing the significance of the data. It's only one person, and one person is the source of the data. So it's hard to hide the person's identity. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope everything helped. See you guys next lesson. Bye.